My name is Bella. I'm 34 years old, a lab technician working at a private medical center in Oregon. My day starts at 6 a.m. I drop off my 6-year-old daughter Ellie at the elementary school near our house, then head to the lab to face trays of blood, urine, and nameless analysis forms. It's not a glamorous job, but I love it, because I see my value in precision, quiet diligence, and consistency. Ellie is the one thing I'm most proud of in my life. She has her father's soft brown curls and my green eyes, always full of light. Every afternoon after work, I try to pick her up myself instead of letting the school bus bring her home. That moment, when she runs to me, arms wide, eager to show me a drawing or a new song from music class, is when I feel most like a mother. My husband, Dean, used to be the man I believed was my soulmate. He works in real estate, often traveling to oversee new housing developments in distant suburbs. Dean used to be gentle, warm, and driven, but lately I've felt him pulling away. He's been coming home late, blaming last-minute client meetings on weekends we could have spent together as a family. Every time Ellie runs to him with a picture, he just nods absent-mindedly and looks back at his phone. Sometimes I feel like I'm just the maid in my own home. My parents, Walter and Nora, live just about a 20-minute drive away. They're retired now, living in a cabin by Crescent Lake. I've always believed their love for Ellie was genuine. They'd bake cookies, turn on cartoons, and sit for hours listening to her school stories. But recently, something has shifted in the way my mom looks at Ellie. It's not exactly cold, but cautious. Like Ellie is something she'd rather not touch. My older sister, Vanessa, is the complete opposite. She's 5 years older than me, was prom queen in high school, and now works as a marketing director for a major cosmetics company in Seattle. Vanessa never married, has no children, and often jokes that I live like an old lady. Still, she never misses a family dinner, always dressed to impress, casually talking about her business trips to Paris or Milan like it's no big deal. 2 weeks ago at dinner, just as we were gathering around Dad's grilled ribs, Vanessa made a strange suggestion. Have you ever thought Ellie might do better somewhere else? Like Seattle? Great private schools. She could stay with me for a few months. I stared at her, stunned. What are you talking about? She's only 6. And I'm her mother. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't warm me like it used to. I'm just thinking about her future. You're busy, Dean's always away. I just want to help. I didn't respond. But that night, lying next to a sleeping Ellie, a strange unease took over me. Dean's late nights, my mom's strange looks, Vanessa's words. They were like puzzle pieces, scattered, but slowly forming a picture I didn't want to see. The next morning, while I was washing Ellie's hair in the bathroom, she looked up at me and asked, "Mom, if one day I don't live with you anymore, will you be sad?" My heart stopped. "Who told you that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Grandma's friend's granddaughter said so, that I'll go to a faraway school and live with someone named V." She didn't finish, but I already knew the name. Vanessa. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of something bigger. A plan that had been in motion for a while. A plan where Ellie was the centerpiece. 3 days after Ellie asked that strange question, Dean came home after 10 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights still on, dinner cold. He walked in, hung up his coat, and said the line I could now recite in my head. "Sorry, a client extended the meeting again." I didn't ask anything. I got up, served him dinner, and sat back down. I didn't want to fight. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes silence is the only way to hear what people are hiding. Dean ate without a word, eyes glued to his phone. At one point, he turned away while texting, and for a split second, I saw a name flash in the reflection on the glass cabinet. "V, call back." "Vanessa?" The name froze me. I couldn't be certain, but my instincts, as a mother, as a wife, told me something was very wrong. The next day, when I picked up Ellie, her teacher told me something that made me freeze. Ellie said she had trouble sleeping. She mentioned someone told her she might have to move and live away from you. "Bella, is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, thanked her, and rushed Ellie home. But my mind was racing. I didn't tell Dean. Instead, I called my mom. Mom, has Vanessa said anything about Ellie lately? There was a long pause before she replied. She's just been talking about the future, Bella. She thinks Ellie deserves a better school. But no one has the right to talk about her future except me, I said, unable to hide my frustration. My mom sighed. Bella, you're a good mom, but you're stretched thin. Dean's always working, and Vanessa, she's just trying to help. Help. I was starting to hate that word. 2 days later, Vanessa dropped by around lunchtime. I had just gotten back from the lab. Dean was meeting a client. Vanessa brought 2 lattes and a bag with kids' clothes. I went shopping, she smiled, setting the bag down. I thought Ellie would love this purple dress. I didn't touch the coffee or open the bag. I looked her in the eyes. What are you doing, Vanessa? She blinked, then gave a light laugh. What? I'm just bringing gifts for my niece. And trying to convince everyone that she should live with you, away from her own mother. Is that what you're doing? Vanessa set her cup down harder than usual, but kept her voice smooth. Bella, you're overreacting. Do you know how much pressure Dean is under? Mom and Dad worry too. We all just want what's best for Ellie. What's best is for her to stay with her mother. A crooked smile flickered across Vanessa's face. Not the sister I used to know. That smile chilled me. If you think being a mother means you get to decide everything, you're mistaken. Children aren't property. That night, I found an unopened envelope in Dean's coat pocket. It was from a law firm in Seattle. Inside, documents about child custody consultation and a draft agreement for temporary guardianship transfer. I sat alone in the living room. The house was so silent I could hear the clock ticking. Only one question echoed in my head. How are they planning to take my daughter away from me? Ellie was asleep in her room, clutching her stuffed bunny like always. But this time, I couldn't calmly watch her sleep the way I used to. A storm was coming. And it wasn't from the outside, but from the very people who shared my blood. I knew I couldn't stay still anymore, because I wasn't just protecting Ellie from a plan. I was protecting her from a world I once believed was family. That Saturday, my mom called, her voice full of cheer. Bella, this weekend we're planning a picnic at Crater Ridge National Park. It's not too far, just about a 2-hour drive. We'll all hike along a little creek and watch the leaves fall. Ellie's going to love it. I didn't even have time to respond before she added, Vanessa's coming too. Your dad's already packed lunch. You just need to get yourself and Ellie ready. I paused for a few seconds, feeling something off. My family was never the outdoorsy type, and they definitely didn't plan last-minute outings in the chilly fall. But then Ellie jumped up on the chair, having overheard, and shouted, Mom, I want to go. I'll bring my magnifying glass. Maybe I'll find a rare red leaf. I smiled and patted her head. How could I say no when her eyes sparkled like that? That night, I told Dean about the trip. He closed his laptop, slightly frowning. Saturday? I've got a site visit with a new investor. Probably won't make it. I wasn't surprised. These meetings had been showing up as often as fallen leaves. I nodded. Then I'll take Ellie. But Dean, do you feel like something's changed in our family? He was quiet for a moment, then said, You're probably just overthinking. Either way, some fresh air might do you good. Saturday morning, I woke up early and packed sandwiches, fruit, water, and even a few bandages. I always carry a first aid kit on trips like this. My job has made me cautious by habit. Ellie wore her green beanie and showed off the tiny magnifying glass hanging around her neck. She was genuinely excited. My parents' car arrived on time. Dad was driving, Mom in the passenger seat, and Vanessa in the back, next to Ellie and me. Vanessa wore a trendy athletic outfit and expensive hiking shoes. Odd, considering I'd never seen her go on a hike before. But I didn't ask. I just observed. The weather was crisp, sunlight filtering softly through the trees. We walked along winding trails, eventually reaching a narrow dirt path into a sparse forest. Dad said, This is a newer route, not many people know about it. The view is amazing. I felt uneasy. This path didn't match any of the old routes we used to take when I was a kid. Still, I said nothing. Ellie chattered beside me, pointing at every branch. Mom, this leaf looks like a heart. Vanessa occasionally glanced at me over her sunglasses. Each time I caught her, she turned away, pretending to check her phone. When I asked, "Texting someone?" She paused for a second, then smiled. "Just checking the weather, signal's bad up here." Then my mom chimed in. "Today's going to be a special day, Bella, one you'll never forget." Even though she was smiling, her words made my skin crawl. My dad kept checking the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking from me and Ellie to the winding road ahead. We stopped at an open clearing near the edge of a gentle slope. In the distance, a valley of pine trees spread out, dotted with orange and red leaves. The breeze was light, the air clean, but my unease wouldn't go away. Dad parked the car, turned off the engine, and said, "From here, it's about a 20-minute walk to this cliff with a breathtaking view. No one in the family's been there yet." I slung the backpack over my shoulder, held Ellie's hand, and followed them. As we entered a denser patch of trees, Vanessa fell back to walk beside me and suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought about sending Ellie to boarding school?" I stopped cold. That question wasn't random. "No, and I have no plans to." Vanessa shrugged. "There are some things you can't control forever, Bella. Life changes fast." It didn't sound threatening, but it made my skin prickle. Just then, Ellie ran ahead, then turned back and called out, "Mom, there's a high spot up here. You can see the whole mountain." Before I could answer, my parents and Vanessa had already moved toward the edge of the cliff. That's when I realized none of them had brought much. Just a few water bottles, no blankets, no food, no maps, not even a compass. I gripped Ellie's hand tighter, feeling my heart pounding. And then I saw my mother give Vanessa a signal with her eyes. I slowed down, pulling Ellie closer as we neared the edge. From here, the entire Crater Ridge Valley came into view, sunlight slicing through distant trees. It was peaceful. Eerily so, like nature itself was trying to distract me. Dad stood right at the edge, pointing out ahead. "See that, Bella? If we go just a bit further, there's another ledge that sticks out. The view from there is incredible. I went once." I nodded faintly, but my eyes never left Mom's hand, tight around her nearly empty backpack. Vanessa stepped closer, then placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "Ever wonder if life could be easier, Bella?" I turned to her, my eyes filled with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away, just smiled, and that smile, once familiar, now held nothing warm. Then suddenly she reached for my arm. I recoiled, instinctively pulling Ellie back. "Get your hand off me, Vanessa." "Bella, I need to show you something. Just for a second." Before she could finish, my dad stepped toward Ellie. She looked up and smiled. "Grandpa, did you see the eagle?" "Of course, sweetheart. Come here, I'll show you." He bent down, lifted her in his arms, and began walking toward the edge. It all happened in seconds, but to me it felt like time stopped. I screamed, "Stop, put her down." But before I could lunge forward, my mother shoved me hard from behind. The force sent me stumbling, my foot slipping on the uneven ground. I nearly lost my balance, my hands flailing until one managed to grip a small branch growing along the cliff's edge. Vanessa stepped closer, her face ice cold. Her voice dropped low. "I'm sorry, Bella, but this is necessary. It'll be over quickly." I struggled to stay upright, heart pounding, my eyes locked on Ellie writhing in my father's arms. "Dad, put her down. She's your granddaughter." But he didn't flinch. In fact, his expression was calm. Eerily so. "She won't remember any of this. It'll be over soon, Bella. For both of you." Panic exploded in my chest. I didn't need more proof. This wasn't some staged accident. This was a plan, a carefully orchestrated plot. with Ellie and me as the targets. In a split second, I threw myself forward, hurling my body into the air. As my hands reached Ellie's dangling legs, I pulled her toward me with every ounce of strength I had left. My father lost his balance, stumbled, and I completely lost my footing. Everything after that was wind roaring in my ears and the blue sky spinning. I wrapped my arms tightly around Ellie, curling myself around her like a living shield. She screamed into the wind. "Mommy!" I didn't answer. I just held her close, as if somehow a mother's love could slow the fall. We hit tree branches, slammed against jagged rocks. Pain burst through my shoulder, my back, my legs. I couldn't tell where I was injured. I just knew I still had Ellie in my arms. When we finally landed on damp earth at the bottom of the cliff, I felt blood running from my forehead into my eyes, blurring everything. But Ellie was still in my arms. Her tiny body trembled. But she was alive. I whispered, barely audible. "Are you okay, Ellie? Mommy? I'm scared." I couldn't say anything more. Darkness swept over me. But I knew I had to stay awake. I had to survive. Because I wasn't just a mother. I was Ellie's only anchor left in this world. They couldn't stop me from falling, but I wouldn't let them bury the truth. Pain screamed through my body, locking me in place. My left eye was swollen shut, my head spinning. My left wrist felt broken, and I couldn't feel my right leg. The smell of blood mixed with damp soil filled my nose. I was still cradling Ellie, her faint breath warm against my neck. I slowly opened my eyes, careful not to move too much. Trees loomed above us, their branches filtering in pale light. The air was unnervingly silent. I swallowed hard and turned my head. Ellie was staring at me, eyes brimming with tears. She whispered, her voice tight. "Mom, are we gonna die?" I shook my head, even though the motion sent a jolt of pain through my shoulder. "No, I'm here with you, and we're going to live." Ellie trembled, then buried her face into my chest. We lay still like that for a while, until I heard faint voices above us. Whispers from the cliff top. "Do you see anything?" My mother's voice. "No, not moving," my father replied, flatly. "Good. No one comes out here. No one's going to find them." Vanessa's voice sounded relieved, but also oddly unsure. I quickly pressed my hand over Ellie's mouth, signaling her to stay quiet. She nodded immediately, tucking her face into my shirt. "Let's go." "If they're alive, they're not getting out of here anyway," my mom added. I held my breath, heart pounding as their footsteps faded into the distance. When I was sure they were gone, I loosened my hand. Ellie looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, what if they come back and find out we're alive? Maybe we should pretend we're not." I stared at her, speechless. She was only 6, yet somehow she understood just how dangerous this was. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, let's stay still for a little longer, okay?" She nodded. I pulled her close, shut my eyes, and kept our bodies as still as possible. Time stopped in that forest. Only the sound of wind and the distant call of birds. I listened to every beat of her small heart beside mine, while anger slowly spread through my veins. Not from the fall, but from the betrayal. My parents. Vanessa. The man I once loved. All of them had joined forces to plan this, to eliminate us like we were just obstacles. After a while, Ellie lifted her head. Her eyes were teary but clear. "Mom, I think I know what they're doing." "What do you mean, Ellie?" I whispered back. "I heard Aunt Vanessa talking to Dad when I was playing hide-and-seek in the garden. I was hiding behind the rose bushes. She said, 'It'll all be over soon, we just need Bella to agree to the picnic.' Dad said, 'Just do what we planned, the insurance money's coming.'" I froze. It felt like someone punched me in the chest. They hadn't just wanted us gone. They had counted on the life insurance. "I didn't tell you before because I thought they were joking. I'm sorry." I hugged her tightly, forcing my voice to stay steady. It's okay, Ellie, you've been so brave. I'm proud of you. I checked the backpack. Most of our supplies had flown out during the fall, but thankfully there was a dry towel and 1 bottle of water left. I cleaned the scrape on Ellie's cheek before turning to assess my leg. The pain shot through me when I tried to lift my right leg. It nearly made me black out. I bit down hard, drawing blood to keep from crying out. It felt broken. My left wrist was badly swollen, barely usable, but I still had my right hand, my mind, and I had Ellie. We needed rescue. But my phone, if it had survived, was probably smashed or lost somewhere on the steep slope. I turned to Ellie. I can't walk fast, but you can. You might be able to find the path back, but only if it's really safe, okay? Ellie shook her head immediately, eyes filling with tears. No! I'm not leaving you alone. I smiled faintly, my face pale from the pain. Then we'll go together. Little by little, I'll lean on you and we'll get out of here. Together. Ellie nodded firmly. I broke off a branch to use as a crutch, leaning on it and on my daughter as we began to inch away from danger. Every step was agony. But I didn't stop. Because I knew, once we made it out alive, the truth would come to light, and this time, no one, not even family, would be able to hide what they'd done. Ellie and I walked through the forest for 3 hours. Every step was a battle between blinding pain and the will to survive. There were moments I wanted to collapse right there and let it all end. But every time, Ellie held my hand and whispered, "Mommy, we're almost out." I gripped her hand tighter and kept going. By late afternoon, we were lucky enough to come across an elderly couple camping near a small creek. The woman, Mrs. Margaret, nearly jumped up when she saw me covered in blood and limping, while Ellie dropped to the ground, completely exhausted. "Can you hear me?" the man asked. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I can't talk. After that, everything became a haze. I barely remember the sound of sirens growing louder, Ellie's small hand wrapped tightly around mine, and her calm voice telling the paramedics that I had protected us. 3 days passed before I regained consciousness in a hospital room. My arm was in a cast, my leg propped up on pillows, and layers of bandages covered the cuts and bruises across my body. Ellie was curled up in a chair beside me, asleep, her tangled hair falling over the face I cherished more than anything. A man in civilian clothes sat quietly next to my bed. He carried the calm but firm demeanor of someone used to difficult conversations. Though his expression was serious, his eyes held a quiet kindness. He introduced himself as Detective Callahan from the Oakfield County Police Department and gently explained that he needed to ask me a few questions about what had happened. Despite the pain, I nodded and began recounting everything. Our family outing, Vanessa's strange behavior, and the terrifying fall that nearly ended my life. I spoke slowly but clearly, determined to leave out nothing. When I got to the part where Ellie overheard Dean and Vanessa talking, I saw Callahan pause, scribbling quickly into his notebook. "Your daughter remembered their conversation clearly?" I nodded. "She's incredibly sharp, and I trust everything she told me." He sat back slightly and said, "We've already started reviewing your husband's financial records, and there's something you need to be aware of." He reached into his case and pulled out a file, flipping it open to a highlighted page. 4 months ago, Dean updated your life insurance policy. He raised it to $3 million, stating it was for emergency family protection. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. A cold chill crept down my spine. $3 million? He nodded gravely. "And the witness who signed the amendment? Your sister!" Vanessa G. Miller. My heart pounded, my head spinning with the realization. So they were in on it together, Dean and Vanessa. "Unfortunately, it goes deeper," Callahan said, cutting in. "We traced a bank transfer from your mother to Dean, made just 1 week before the incident. The memo line read, 'Final payment for the plan,' amounting to $500,000. My breath caught in my throat. My parents? They were part of it too? Callahan didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Bella." All signs point to a conspiracy involving your husband, your sister, and your parents. The messages we found suggest they'd been coordinating this plan for over 6 months, likely intending to silence both you and your daughter. The walls around me seemed to close in. The people I had trusted most, my family, had plotted my demise. After a moment, Callahan continued. We issued warrants for Dean and Vanessa immediately after you gave your statement. But when our team got to their locations, both had vanished. Dean's car was later found near a small, private airstrip. My stomach dropped. This wasn't over. I could feel it. Will you catch them? I asked, meeting his gaze. We've issued a federal warrant. In the meantime, I recommend that you and Ellie go into protective custody until we can ensure your safety, he said firmly. I looked at my daughter's sleeping face, still dotted with healing cuts, and felt a surge of strength rise within me. I was no longer the scared, broken woman who had fallen off a cliff. I had survived, and I would fight for justice with everything I had. 3 days later, I was moved to a secure recovery room with law enforcement stationed just outside. Ellie was placed temporarily under the care of a social worker while the investigation deepened. When Callahan returned, he was holding a much thicker case file. His face was set with purpose. This wasn't just a case to him anymore. It was personal. We just got a hit from a toll booth camera 200 miles out. It captured Vanessa driving out of Oregon, likely heading toward Nevada. We've escalated the warrant to federal status. I gripped the edge of the bed, even though my wrist was still bandaged. What about Dean? Callahan flipped to another page. He's using an alias, but here's something interesting. When we checked flight history, we found he booked a private flight under the name Daniel Morrison. The departure time matches when they disappeared, but the flight was canceled at the last minute, possibly because he suspected we were onto him. I exhaled slowly. They weren't free yet. The next day, I was allowed to meet with a government-appointed attorney. During our first session, he confirmed, "We have complete financial records, your daughter's testimony, and recovered text messages between Dean and Vanessa from Dean's old phone, which the police found in his abandoned car. This case has enough evidence to charge them with attempted murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud." Just then, the door opened. Ellie walked in with a female social worker. She ran over, throwing her arms around me, her face lighting up despite the bandages on her cheeks. "Mommy, I told Detective Callahan everything. I remember it all." I blinked in surprise. "You gave a statement?" Ellie nodded, then looked over at Callahan, who had entered behind her. He smiled. "This little girl is so sharp and composed. Our investigators were stunned." She recounted everything she heard. Vanessa's call with Dean, and even the conversation between Mrs. Nora and Mr. Walter about how everything would be fine if Bella just didn't push back. I looked at my daughter, torn between heartbreak and pride. She was only 6, yet she was the key to unraveling everything that had been hidden. "Were you scared?" I asked softly. Ellie shook her head. "No, I just thought, if I told the truth, then you wouldn't have to be scared anymore." I held my daughter tightly, feeling each tiny breath begin to steady against my chest. Everything wasn't over yet, but I knew we were finally heading in the right direction. 2 days later, the police found Dean hiding out in a small cash-only rental cabin on the edge of Nevada. They raided the place at dawn and arrested him while he was trying to burn papers and destroy his laptop. Vanessa was arrested later that afternoon at a roadside gas station. She'd been trying to swap vehicles through an off-the-record deal but was recognized by a security camera. That evening, Callahan gave a short update. "Both are in custody and being extradited back to Oregon. As for your parents, Walter and Nora, we've issued subpoenas. They were recorded in a call with Dean discussing a split agreement. It's undeniable." I looked out the hospital window, the late afternoon sun casting soft light through the trees. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. 3 days later, we were officially discharged, but the police advised that Ellie and I move into a secured witness protection residence until the trial. In a closed press briefing, police confirmed, Evidence confirms this was a coordinated murder plot to obtain a $3 million 0 cents life insurance payout. The 6-year-old girl is not only the sole surviving witness, but the key to uncovering the entire plan. I held Ellie's hand tightly as we watched the broadcast on TV. We were in an unfamiliar place, under 24/7 protection, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Because now the truth was finally on our side. 8 months after Ellie and I survived the fall at Crater Ridge, the trial of Dean, Vanessa, and my parents officially began at Oakfield County Courthouse. The whole small town buzzed with disbelief. No one could imagine that a seemingly perfect family was now facing charges of attempted murder. On the first day, I arrived in a wheelchair, my arm still in a brace from a fracture that hadn't fully healed. Ellie sat beside me, gripping my hand, wearing a sky blue dress she chose because it's Mommy's favorite color. I didn't cry, and I wasn't afraid. What I brought to court was the truth, and the unwavering strength of a mother who couldn't be broken by betrayal. Dean entered in a gray suit, expressionless. Vanessa followed, hair tied neatly, her eyes gliding past me like I was a stranger. My parents, Walter and Nora, kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I was used to that look. I'd grown up with it. The prosecutor opened with a sharp indictment, laying out detailed evidence of the murder plot, insurance fraud, and endangerment of a minor. Every fact cut like a knife, but I sat calmly. I had survived to expose this truth. I was called to testify on the second day. The courtroom was silent as I recounted everything. The trip, the fall, the unbearable pain, and the unforgivable betrayal. I didn't cry. My voice was steady. I looked Dean in the eye and said, "You didn't kill me, and you'll never get what you wanted. Because Ellie is not something you can trade for money." Vanessa kept her head down. She never once looked at me. That day, Ellie also testified, but through a pre-recorded video since she was still under child witness protection. In the video, her voice was small but clear. I heard Aunt Vanessa tell my dad that Mommy and I wouldn't be here anymore if everything went right. I was really scared, but I trusted Mommy. She protected me. She's a good person. No one in the courtroom could hold back tears, not even the judge. During their defense, Dean stood up, voice bitter and defensive. I was pushed into a corner. Bella wasn't the woman I once loved. She controlled everything. I just wanted freedom, to escape that suffocating life. Vanessa wasn't any softer. Bella always acted like she was right, the victim. But if she weren't around, Dean would have been happy. We just wanted to be free. I sat quietly. Their words no longer hurt me. In fact, they only revealed the depth of their guilt. It wasn't just murder they attempted. It was complete denial of accountability. When asked if they had any last words before sentencing, my parents said nothing about me or Ellie. My father only mumbled, "We just thought she didn't deserve that life." The judge struck the gavel 3 times. The air in the courtroom froze as the verdict was read. Defendants Dean Carter and Vanessa G. Miller are sentenced to 25 years in prison for first-degree attempted murder and are barred from contacting any witnesses post-Kalish. Defendants Walter and Nora G. Miller are sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and child endangerment. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding my whole life. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. Just relieved. Justice had finally spoken the names of the people who once called me daughter. After the trial, dozens of strangers approached me and Ellie, former neighbors, old friends, even people I'd never met, hugging us, offering words of support, saying, "You survived for all those who were too afraid to speak." I didn't say a word. I just leaned down, hugged Ellie close, and whispered in her ear, "We did it, Ellie. Now it's time to start truly living." After the trial, Ellie and I didn't return to our old home in Oregon. The police advised us to remain under witness protection until all threats were cleared, but I requested a transfer to somewhere far away. Somewhere without memories. somewhere no one knew our names, somewhere Ellie could start over. With help from my attorney and a domestic abuse survivor support group, I reconnected with an old friend, Grace, a high school classmate I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years. When she heard what had happened, she didn't ask for details. She just said over the phone, "Come here, stay as long as you need." Evergreen Valley, Colorado welcomed us on an early spring morning. The snow hadn't fully melted, but new buds were already pushing through the earth. Grace lived with her husband and 2 young kids in a cabin on the edge of the woods, about a 15-minute drive from town. The air was peaceful, strangely quiet, and for the first time in ages, I saw Ellie sleep through the night without waking up. I began working part-time at a small clinic downtown. Dr. Caroline, the owner, was an older woman, stern but compassionate. During our first meeting, she looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't need to know your past, but I see the caution in your eyes, and that's what patients need. If you're willing, you've got a job here." I nodded, unable to hide my gratitude. The work wasn't much, but it gave me rhythm again. The sound of blood pressure monitors, the click of drawers, the scent of antiseptic, these things gave me back a sense of control after so long drowning in chaos. Ellie was enrolled at a small elementary school just down the road from Grace's house. At first, she was shy, quiet, often sitting alone during recess. But just a few weeks in, her teacher called me and said, "Today, Ellie drew a picture of her family. It was of a little girl holding hands with a woman standing under the sun. When I asked, she said, 'That's me and my mom because we walked through a really dark night.'" I was silent for a long moment, eyes stinging. Then I simply said, "Thank you for telling me." Ellie and I began seeing a trauma therapist once a week. Her name was Dr. Helen Monroe, a specialist in working with survivors. She didn't ask direct questions. Instead, she let Ellie draw, play with sand, and describe her dreams in the simplest words. With me, she only said, "Don't force yourself to forgive. Focus on the one thing worth keeping: survival." Week by week, I watched Ellie begin to smile more. She started telling me stories from class, about how Jason spilled milk on his shirt and didn't cry, or how the teacher read books in a funny voice. Simple things, small things, but to me, they were proof she was becoming a child again. One Friday afternoon, I was cooking dinner with Grace in the warm kitchen when Ellie came running in, cheeks pink from the wind. "Mom, we're going on a field trip tomorrow. The teacher said you can come if you want." I looked at her and suddenly remembered myself in the forest, hands bloodied, back aching, never letting go of my daughter for even a second. I smiled. "Of course I'll come, you and me. We always go together." That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I stepped out onto the porch, leaning against the wooden railing, gazing up at a sky full of stars. I thought about everything I'd lost. A family that no longer felt like one, a marriage that once seemed perfect, and the people who had once called me daughter, sister. But then I thought about what I still had: a brave little girl, real friends, and a second chance, in a place where no one knew my name, and where I could live without fear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt light. It happened naturally, as if everything had been quietly aligning without any of us noticing. The first person to strike up a conversation was Mr. David Clark, the principal at Ellie's school. I met him during a parent meeting, about 3 months after Ellie started school in Evergreen Valley. David was tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He radiated patience and warmth, qualities I hadn't seen in a man for many years. After the meeting, he caught me in the hallway as I struggled to untangle Ellie's jacket from a door handle. "You're Ellie's mom, right? I'm David Clark, the principal. I just wanted to say, she's a wonderful student." I smiled, still a little guarded. "Thank you. She's trying really hard to catch up." He looked at me for a moment, then said gently, "You don't need to explain anything. Here, we don't care about anyone's past. All we care about is that today," Ellie smiled on the playground. After that day, I saw Mr. David more often when picking Ellie up. At first, we exchanged brief greetings. Then our conversations grew longer, deeper. I told him about my work at the clinic, about Ellie and our journey. He told me about his years teaching math before becoming a principal, and why he chose to stay in a small town instead of moving to the city. David never asked about the scars on my arms, or why Ellie sometimes woke up screaming in the night. He just listened when I was ready to speak, and sat in silence when I needed space to heal. Ellie's 8th birthday came on a softly snowy day. I'd planned a small gathering in Grace's backyard, but Grace had secretly invited neighbors, my coworkers from the clinic, and even Mr. David and a few teachers from school. Ellie wore a light purple dress, the color she said looked like the sky when I hugged Mommy at sunset. She ran around the yard among laughter, balloons, cake, and bright-colored gift boxes. Her face glowed like winter sunlight. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as David knelt to help Ellie retie the scarf slipping from her neck. They were both laughing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left behind. After the party, as guests slowly left, David stayed behind to help clean up. I was loading dishes into the sink when he handed me a small envelope. This is a little gift from the school. We do this for all our students who've been through tough times. Nothing big, just a couple movie tickets and a new book. I took the envelope, so moved I nearly teared up. But David didn't leave right away. He stood still for a moment, then looked at me seriously. Bella, I don't know what brought you here, but I do know this. What you and your daughter brought to this place is something truly special. Strength, hope, and kindness. I said nothing, my fingers tightening around the envelope. Do you believe family can be something we create, not just something we're born into? I asked. David didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes, deep and gentle, was a more perfect answer than any words could have been. That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, can I call Mr. David Uncle? He's kind, like he's part of our family." I smiled softly and nodded. "You can call him anything you want, sweetheart, as long as you feel safe and happy." I stood quietly by the bedroom window, watching the snow fall outside the porch. Each white flake drifted down like it was softly covering the traces of everything we'd left behind. And I knew Ellie was right. Family doesn't have to be the people we share blood with. Family is where someone waits for us to step out of the dark, with kindness, patience, and unconditional love. And I had found that kind of family. In Ellie's eyes, in the embrace of friends, and in a man who gently tied a scarf for an 8-year-old girl with all his heart. Our story, Ellie's and mine, isn't just about survival. It's proof that sometimes real family doesn't come from blood, but from the people who choose to love and stay. We lost everything, only to find what truly matters: freedom, peace, and trust. In a world full of uncertainty, I've learned that no matter how dark the past may be, with love and faith, we can rewrite our lives, even from the most shattered pieces. What do you think about Bella and Ellie's journey? Is real family defined by blood or by love and choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and resilience. My name is Gabriella. I grew up in a small lakeside town in Minnesota, where winters dragged on forever and everyone knew each other. As a kid, I thought I had a normal family. My dad was a high school physics teacher, and my mom worked night shifts as a nurse at the county hospital. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I used to be the only child, and for a brief time, I thought I was loved the way every child deserves to be. Mom used to brush my hair before heading to work, and Dad would take me fishing every weekend. On summer evenings, the three of us would sit on the porch, eating ice cream and listening to cicadas in the calm night air. I believed that was what a warm family was built on. But it all ended on a freezing January night, right after I turned 8. I was woken up in the middle of the night by urgent knocking and headlights flashing in the driveway. My aunt, Evelyn, stepped into the house with a pale face, telling me to grab a coat and a few things. Mom was at the hospital, she said. My baby sister had been born 2 months early and needed special care. I was too young to understand what was really happening, but I knew one thing: nothing was ever the same after that night. They named her Lily, a tiny red little life form surrounded by tubes and machines, lying silently inside an incubator. I wasn't allowed near her. We can't risk her getting sick, Mom said flatly, eyes glued to the heart monitor. When I reached out to touch her hand, she brushed me away gently, like I too was a threat. From the moment Lily came home, everything revolved around her. Our house became a sterile zone. Sanitizer in every room, air purifiers running around the clock. And the bleach smell was so strong, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a burning throat. Anytime I coughed or even sneezed, Mom would pack me up and send me to Grandma's. At first, I thought it was a treat. Grandma made amazing apple pie and always saved me a new book. But little by little, I understood. I wasn't welcome in my own home. I was seen as a potential risk to Lily, the precious one all their hopes were pinned on. I got a perfect score on my first 3rd grade math test. I brought it home, hoping Mom would stick it on the fridge like she used to. She glanced at the paper, then turned to ask Dad if he remembered to buy tissues because Lily seemed a little stuffy. And Dad? He just nodded and said, "Good job," without a hug, without even a real smile. It was just done. I tried everything to win back their attention. I drew pictures, won first place in the school science fair, told Mom about all the fascinating things I read in books. But every effort was dismissed with the same excuse. Lily has a mild fever. Lily's sleeping. Lily needs rest. Gabriella, please be quiet. I gradually learned how to stay invisible. I kept to myself in my room, which always smelled like peppermint oil, the one scent that bothered Lily, so she wasn't allowed in. It was the only space that felt like mine, where I started diving into art history, antiques, and the imagined worlds behind every old painting. But what hurt more than being ignored was when they began rewriting the past. Gabriella's always been strong and independent, Mom told the neighbors when I got into the gifted program. She understands that Lily needs extra care. No, I didn't understand. I only knew I once had a family, and then one day, it vanished, without warning. I slowly realized expectations were never meant for me. Praise, hugs, even just a proud glance from my parents, all of it was for Lily. I didn't need that stuff, they thought. Gabriella's the type who takes care of herself, Mom would say when someone asked about me. But being independent doesn't mean not needing love. In 8th grade, I applied for a job at a bakery in town called Sugar Pines. The owner, Mrs. Lorraine, was the first person outside my family who saw value in me. She never asked why a 13-year-old wanted to mop floors and sell pastries after school. She just put a hand on my shoulder and said, "If you work hard, you deserve a place in the world." I've never forgotten that. Every day after school, I'd head to the bakery, tie up my hair, and start wiping tables, washing trays, and taking orders. At home, I'd quietly do homework at my tiny desk in the corner of my room. No one ever asked where I'd been, when I got back, or what I was doing, so long as I didn't startle Lily with the smell of hand soap. Lily was different. She never had to work, never had to clean up her textbooks, and certainly never set foot in a bakery unless it was to buy her birthday cake. Every time Lily had an event, from group presentations to church performances, the whole family would show up with flowers and a video camera. Me? Even when I got a perfect score on the SAT, Mom just muttered, "That's good," while slicing fruit for Lily because she's low on vitamin C. During senior year, I applied to 12 colleges. I didn't tell anyone. I quietly wrote essays during my breaks at the bakery and had Mrs. Lorraine proofread them. She even taught me how to write from the heart, she called it. I got my own recommendation letters, filled out my financial aid forms, and figured out FAFSA on my own. Every step I took was silent and solo, but never hesitant. I didn't expect my parents to pay for college, so I applied for every scholarship I could find. Merit-based, need-based, first generation, Every line of every application was my quiet rebellion against being overlooked. I worked all summer, saved every tip, and even stuffed coins into a piggy bank to afford a bus ticket to a scholarship interview in the next state. Then, one spring afternoon, while wiping down the bakery counter like always, I got an email. I'd been accepted to Northwestern University with a full-ride scholarship. I stood frozen in the buttery sweet scent of cookies, eyes stinging, smiling uncontrollably. Mrs. Lorraine hugged me like I was her own granddaughter. It was the first time I cried because someone was truly proud of me. That night, I brought the acceptance letter home and showed it to Mom. She glanced at it and set it on the table. "Congrats. But don't tell Lily. She's stressed out lately." I nodded, folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and headed upstairs, while Lily laughed downstairs about her new ballet shoes from that boutique I'd never even dared step into. Weeks later, the whole family threw a little party because Lily won second place in a school art contest. Dad even hung her drawing in the living room with a plaque that read, "The family's talent." I looked at the picture, a pink cat standing on a rainbow. Then back at my essay, praised as exceptional beyond expectation by a college professor, now tucked away in my desk drawer. That's when I knew. No matter how hard I tried, I'd always be the child who didn't cause trouble, and Lily, no matter how ordinary, would always be the special one. But this time, I had the key to leave, and I swore I'd become someone they could never ignore again. I chose to major in art history at Northwestern partly out of passion, partly because I was done letting anyone else make choices for me. Those lectures on Art Deco, European dynasties, and the symbolism of antique jewelry brought me back to memories with Grandma, who used to let me sort through boxes of old brooches, necklaces, and earrings whenever I was sent to her house. I still remember a hairpin shaped like a swan with pale lavender stones. Back then, I didn't know if it was valuable, just that the way the light hit the gem left me breathless. I spent hours by the window staring at it like it was treasure. Now I know. The gaze we give an antique isn't just fascination. It's instinct. A kind of intuition only I could trust. Graduating with honors, I landed an unpaid internship at a small jewelry appraisal firm in Chicago, mostly working with local auction houses. While my friends rushed into big media or finance firms, I quietly pulled on white gloves, bent over a magnifying glass, and photographed every tiny scratch on rings no one else cared about. At the time, I didn't know those nameless pieces would change my life. The first big shift came from a brooch listed as costume jewelry, the kind worth maybe a few $dozen. I didn't know why, but the moment I picked it up, something stirred in me. The design was simple, yet the detailing was exquisite. The edges were finely engraved, the enamel flawless, and on the back was a tiny mark, almost worn away. I spent the whole evening researching that mark. Turns out, it belonged to a French artisan who used to make jewelry for the nobility in the early 20th century, before his workshop was destroyed during the war. The brooch wasn't just authentic, it was incredibly rare. I presented my findings in a small meeting with my supervisors. I didn't speak out of pride, but with every bit of passion I had. I backed it up with archival documents, design comparisons, and even asked a friend from the university library to help me access a museum database to pull original records. The result? The brooch was reappraised with a starting value of $12,000, and when it went up for auction at the Antique Showcase in Seattle, it sold for over $40,000. That was the first time my name appeared in the company email, with a short line of praise, "Gabriella has a sharp eye." I kept working as if nothing had happened, but more and more pieces that had been misjudged started accidentally landing in my hands. One time it was a cloisonné enamel necklace, written off as a reproduction, but it turned out to be an original by a 19th century Russian artist. Another time, a platinum wedding ring mistaken for a generic bridal piece. It was actually a limited design, one of only 30 made for a historic Boston family's anniversary. I began being trusted with larger collections. My supervisor, Margaret, invited me to lunch for the first time. While slicing a tart, she said, "Gabriella, have you ever thought about going solo?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. Me? The girl who's worked unpaid for 2 years and survives on instant noodles? She tilted her head, eyes sharp. Exactly. The hungriest people find the rarest meals. Her words stuck with me. I started taking on small verification jobs, pawn shops, family-owned antique stores, places that couldn't afford big firms. I charged less, but left no detail unchecked. Careful, patient, never skipping a single step. One night, I returned to my rundown apartment on the 4th floor, opened the closet and stared at the notebook my grandmother had left me. On the first page, in messy handwriting, it read, "It's not the rare item. It's the girl who sees it as treasure." I understood. If I had once been invisible in my own home, now, every piece I touched was how I redefined myself. And I swore I would never let anyone misjudge me again, just as I'd never misjudge the true value of a hidden gem buried beneath time's dust. I started my own business in the fall of my 27th year. No one knew, not that anyone asked. My family still thought I was working some temporary job somewhere, as if my whole career was just a pause between Lily's constant major changes. I rented a tiny office on the 3rd floor of an old building in Milwaukee, just above an Italian cafe and next to a closed-down dental clinic. The office was barely 300 square feet, with a wobbly wooden desk propped up by a file box, a chair I salvaged from the trash and cleaned thoroughly, and a second-hand lamp from a flea market. Every time I switched it on, the bulb made a faint click, like even it wasn't sure about my dream. I named the company Aurum and Iris. Aurum for gold, Iris after the flower my mom used to grow in our yard before Lily was born and everything withered in silence. The beginning was tough. I worked with small-time clients, an elderly woman wanting to verify her engagement ring from the Great Depression, a local antique dealer needing to tell real platinum from a plated mix. I charged less than the big firms, but my work was meticulous, right down to gemstone microscopy and historical provenance tracking. My reputation began to grow. One referral turned into 2. Then came calls from estate lawyers, private collectors, even a small regional museum needing help appraising an inherited jewelry set that had never been professionally examined. In my 2nd year, I moved to a larger office. This time, it was on the ground floor, glass-fronted with a proper sign, still not far from the Italian cafe. I hired my first employee, Maya, a recent geology graduate with bright eyes and an uncanny patience for tiny stones. I taught her how to examine gemstone cuts under filament bulbs, how to spot signs of handcrafting with the naked eye, and most importantly, how to trust intuition. Things grew faster than I expected. By year 5, I had 3 operating offices in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Denver. We served clients from both coasts, handled authentication contracts for million-dollar auctions, and specialized in forgotten collections found in storage rooms, safes, and attics. My net worth at the time was over $12 million, not including nearly $1 million more in pending authentication contracts. I still lived in a small house in the suburbs, drove a neutral-toned silver SUV, and used an older model phone, not because I was frugal, but because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My family still had no idea. To them, I was just Gabriella, the stubborn daughter who refused to get a stable office job, made a living handling old stuff, and always missed dinner because I was probably busy dusting antiques again. I still went to Sunday dinners, still listened to Mom talk about how Lily had just changed her major for the 4th time, this time to animal behavior psychology, and how she might have finally found her passion. Still heard Dad suggest I apply for a job at the local high school because they have good insurance. Still watch Lily scroll through Instagram mid-conversation, showing off a new designer bag she claimed was from a sale, though one glance told me it was a limited edition piece, never discounted anywhere. Whenever they asked what I was doing, I just gave a soft smile. Same old. A little authentication work, a few vintage pieces. No one asked for details. No one noticed that the pearl necklace I wore once belonged to a British noblewoman from the Edwardian era, or that the ruby hairpin was a rare early 20th century design. They assumed it was flea market stuff. I didn't bother correcting them. Once, Lily joked during dinner. Gab probably has enough necklaces to open a shop. I smiled, poured myself some orange juice, and said, "Who knows, right?" I could have said it all, that I was behind some of the biggest authentication cases in the region, that my company had just signed a contract with the National Museum, that I was invited to write for a top gemology journal, that the bracelet Lily was wearing was a fake. But I didn't. Because sometimes, silence is the only crown the overlooked get to wear, without asking for permission. I began sending money to my parents at the end of my 5th year in business. It started at $3,000 a month, then rose to $5,000, then $7,000. When Lily's sudden academic expenses increased after switching to her 5th major, this time in interior design. Coincidentally, the very field I once dreamed of but couldn't pursue because the family couldn't afford it. Mom called me one weekend evening, her voice lowering after a few polite thank yous. "Lily's really finding herself, you know? But tuition at Parsons isn't cheap, and your father, a teacher's salary can't cover it all." I was at my desk, reviewing documents for a $400,000 antique jewelry appraisal, nodding like I was thinking about a discounted loaf of bread. "Can you help a little?" she asked, after a brief pause. I asked in return, "How much do you need per month?" $7,000. But just for a while. Once Lily graduates, she'll help out the whole family. I didn't mention that Lily hadn't finished any program in the past 6 years. I didn't ask why they hadn't suggested she apply for scholarships or part-time jobs. Instead, I opened my business account and set up an automatic monthly transfer of $7,000 under the label Family Support, Tuition Assistance. Every time the money went out, I reminded myself, not because they deserve it, but because I can do it. Not everyone can. Jessica Felix. I kept pretending not to hear Mom telling the neighbors, "Gabriella lives so frugally, she basically eats canned soup and rides the bus." Pretending not to see Lily posting vacation pics from Cabo with designer bags, captioned, "I deserve this after a tough semester." Once, during Sunday dinner, I had just finished cutting a slice of roast when Lily looked at me with a half smirk. "Ever thought about doing an MBA, Gab? Might help with your little antique shop job?" Mom didn't laugh. She nodded thoughtfully. "She's right. Everyone has a master's degree now. If you went back to school, you might find a better job." I stayed quiet and took a sip of water. The glass was slightly fogged, and in my mind was the design for the new gallery in New York, one I had just signed the contract for last week. A $2,500,000 0 cents project, and I was in charge of authenticating every single piece of jewelry. But they didn't need to know. They never wanted to. Lily still believed I lived off our parents' savings. Once, at her boyfriend's birthday party, after a few drinks, she let it slip to her friends. My sister? No idea why she's still chasing all that dusty old stuff. My parents still help her pay rent out of pity. One of her friends, who happened to be a former client of mine, later told me exactly what she said. I remember laughing when I heard it, not out of sadness, not out of anger, just empty. The kind of emptiness that comes from standing at the top and looking down, only to see your family still at the base of the mountain, unwilling to climb, but demanding you drop them a rope. I stayed silent. Just like those antique pieces I once found buried in piles of junk. Sometimes, silence is what makes something truly rare. But things started to shift when Lily bought a new car. A limited edition BMW sports model. She posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Rewarding myself after a tough semester. Hard work always pays off." That car, I knew, cost over $90,000, 0 cents. And I also knew no student at Parsons could afford it without quiet funding. That day Mom called me, voice full of pride. "Did you see, honey? Lily's doing so well. She's handling everything on her own now. She's really got the potential to be successful." I stayed quiet again, but this time there was no patience left in me. Just one clear question echoing in my mind. When will they finally see me? not the faded shadow they made up. I hadn't planned to host Thanksgiving that year. Honestly, I was planning to disappear somewhere, alone. But then Mom called, sounding more fragile than usual. "I haven't been feeling well, Gabriella. No one's really up to cooking this year. Everyone's looking forward to the holiday, you know how it is." I knew. Looking forward to a dinner no one remembers cooking, but everyone would remember if I didn't show up. I paused for a few seconds before replying. "I'll take care of it, you get some rest." In truth, I had already contacted a high-end catering service from Chicago, the same one I used for my company's auction events. They specialized in private dinners for collectors, offering custom-designed menus where every dish was a work of art, from plating to seasoning. I paid for everything with my company's secondary card. No one knew, no one asked. Everyone just assumed I knew a few chefs. On Thanksgiving morning, I arrived early. The catering team followed an hour later with portable ovens, silver trays, and even a professional tablescape designer. Lily caught a glimpse of them and whispered to Mom. "Isn't she going a little overboard? Looks like she's trying to impress someone." I gave a small smile. Impress? I had no one left to impress. I just wanted one real meal. No dry turkey, no mushy potatoes, no gravy so salty you had to gulp water between bites. Dinner was served right on time. Nearly 20 people filled the house. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, distant relatives, and of course Lily and her new boyfriend, all gasping over every dish. I didn't say much, just smiled and poured wine. Mid-meal, I quietly went upstairs to my old room to monitor a live auction happening in Tokyo. A longtime client of mine was bidding on a rare Meiji-era gemstone set. I couldn't afford to be distracted. I opened my laptop, launched the authentication software, and tracked the bids while staying connected with my assistant via Bluetooth headset. Then, Lily barged in without knocking. "Do you have an iPhone charger? My phone's dying," she asked, without waiting for a reply, eyes already locked on the glowing laptop screen, where graphs and figures lit up clearly. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She gave a slight smirk. "Mind if I borrow this? Let's show everyone just how cool your little antique work is." Before I could stand up, she picked up the laptop and walked straight to the dining room. "Guys, look what Gabriella's doing on Thanksgiving," she called out as I rushed after her. "Hi!" She spun the screen around for all to see. No one said a word. Open tabs revealed a bank account with a $12,600,000 0 cents balance, a pending $400,000 0 cents authentication contract, and the latest internal quarterly report, clearly stating company earnings of over $4 million, 0 cents. Silence. The kind of silence where you can hear a fork graze the edge of a plate. Mom broke it first. She gave a small laugh, forced down a bite of turkey, then shook her head. "Come on now. Gabriella's probably just helping someone. With paperwork, right, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath, straightened my sleeves, and stepped into the middle of the room. "No, Mom. I'm the one signing that contract. I'm the CEO of Aurum and Iris. My company operates 3 offices across 3 states, specializing in antique jewelry and estate asset authentication. Everything you're seeing is real." Someone dropped a spoon. Aunt Evelyn's jaw dropped open. My father leaned back, sweat on his forehead. Lily gripped the edge of the table, her voice cracking. You have that kind of money and didn't say anything? Mom and Dad are in debt for me. I'm still in school." I turned to my mom. "I've been transferring $7,000 0 cents to you every month for over 2 years. You never wondered where it came from?" Her face went pale. My dad turned bright red. Lily started crying. "I have a right to know," she shouted, her voice shaking. "I'm your sister. Family is supposed to share." I looked at her. At all of them. The ones who once dismissed me, belittled me, looked down on me, while living off the effort I worked so hard for. I spoke softly but clearly. Family doesn't mean carrying the people who always look down on you. I closed the laptop and walked toward the door. Behind me, someone yelled something about obligations and duties, But I didn't turn back. All I could hear was the steady beat of my heart, like the ticking of an old gold watch, still running smoothly despite dust and time. No one stood to hug me. No one said, "Gabriella, we're proud of you." No congratulations, no genuine smile. After a long stretch of silence, the first thing I heard was Mom's voice, sharp like a punch to the chest. "You've got millions of dollars and you still let your parents struggle? Did you even think about your sister?" I didn't get a chance to answer before Lily screamed, tears running down her cheeks. "I deserve to know. I'm your sister. You kept it all a secret and you just sat there, watching us suffer." "Suffering?" I let out a short laugh. "You call flying business class, wearing a Cartier watch, and buying a BMW suffering?" My father, who had been silent until now, slammed his hand on the table. "That's enough. No matter what you do, you're still a daughter of this family. Families share. You should be ashamed for keeping this a secret." I looked around the table. Their eyes weren't the eyes of loved ones. They looked at me like a safe that had just been cracked open. "I've sent $7,000 0 cents a month to you and Mom for 2 years. Every time you called crying, saying you couldn't manage, I never asked why. I didn't set conditions, I just quietly sent the money. And this is how I'm repaid?" "Then why didn't you say anything?" my mother shot back. "Why didn't you tell us you were successful? Was it because you didn't want us to rely on you? Or because you wanted to keep it all to yourself?" I tightened my grip on the glass, keeping my voice steady. "Because I got used to being ignored. Ever since Lily was born, I stopped being a priority. Every award I won, every exam I aced, it was all forgotten because your sister needs to rest." I looked directly at my mother. "Do you remember when I got a perfect SAT score, or when I got a full scholarship? And Dad, do you remember my graduation? No one came. Everyone was too busy watching Lily's preschool ballet recital." Mom's hands were trembling. Her lips moved, but no words came out. "And now, the moment you find out I did something none of you ever believed I could do, your first reaction is anger because I didn't share it?" "That's not it," Lily cut in. "I'm just shocked. I feel betrayed. You didn't trust me." I turned to my sister, my voice low. "You've never trusted me. You've always seen me as the shadow behind you. You mocked my work in front of your friends. You told them I lived off Mom and Dad. When I'm the one who paid for every semester you studied, every vacation you bragged about online." Lily froze, eyes wide. She didn't expect me to know everything. "Gabriella, I'm not trying to fight, but you can't hoard that kind of fortune and expect everyone to act like nothing's changed," my mom said, her voice shaking. "The family needs help. You could start a fund. For Lily? She wants to open her own interior design firm." "You mean use my money to fund a dream that's never been followed through?" I opened my purse, pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and said firmly, "I just canceled the automatic transfers." The room exploded. My mom screamed, "Gabriella, you can't do that. Your father and I were counting on that. Lily hasn't even finished her degree." "Then it's time to start figuring it out. I've been on my own since I was 17. If I could do it, so can the rest of you." I stood up. The chair hit the floor with a solid thud. No one stopped me. But I still turned back, one last time. If the only reason anyone wants to keep me in their life is money, then, I'm sorry, but I'm done buying love. And I don't need it anymore. I walked out as whispers erupted behind me. Someone mentioned a lawyer. Someone else said, "She'll regret this." But when I closed that heavy wooden door behind me, the only thing I felt was relief. I left Thanksgiving dinner, no one saw me out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. That night, back in my apartment, my phone started buzzing nonstop, like someone was holding down the call button. Texts flooded the screen. The first few were from my mother. "Gabriella, you're making everything worse. We need to talk. Lily's falling apart. Can't you see she's lost all faith?" Family is where you come back to, not what you walk away from. Then my dad, colder and more measured. I don't know what kind of person you've become, but this is not how you treat family. Message number 37 came from Lily. You're ruining everything. You'll regret this. I powered off the phone and placed it face down on the table, like doing that could somehow make the storm go away. But the next day, company email started receiving spam, mostly from names that were all too familiar, uncles, distant relatives, even the wife of my dad's friend who used to say, Gabrielle is sweet even if she's not exactly brilliant. I hired an attorney. His name was Marcus. He had represented some of my VIP clients in estate disputes. When I handed him the thread of messages, his face didn't change. He simply nodded. You need a clean break. Financially and legally. I'll draft the cease and desist letters today. We sent official notices to everyone on the list, demanding they stop all forms of harassment, threats, or financial requests. I asked Marcus to include one short line, not in legalese, but in plain human language. Love, if it exists, should never come with an invoice. A week later, Lily posted a long, cryptic message on social media. It started with, "Not everyone with money has a heart." Alongside the caption were old photos. Me holding her as a baby, me at her high school graduation, me smiling at her 17th birthday dinner. The whole post read like an emotional indictment designed to win sympathy. The comments split into two camps. One side called me a cold-hearted ATM. The other wondered why someone getting an MBA was using 8-year-old pictures to play the victim. I didn't respond. I simply opened an old wooden box in my closet and took out the vintage necklace Grandma Marie gave me when I was 15, a single pearl, hanging quietly on faded gold. I fastened it around my neck, like putting on the piece of memory that had made me strong all these years. Grandma was the only family member I hadn't blocked. When I called and told her everything, she wasn't surprised. She just sighed. You finally did what you should have done a long time ago. I stayed silent. She continued, her voice slow but firm. Gabriela, family isn't the people who pull you back when you're trying to fly. You've lived in their shadow long enough. It's time you choose your own light. The following week, I invited her to stay with me for a few days. She arrived with a small suitcase and a tin of butter cookies she'd baked herself. We sat in the living room, going through a gem collection I'd just acquired from Switzerland. And she, the one who had taught me how to tell real from fake with instinct, smiled like her whole life had been waiting for that moment. I changed all my phone numbers. Every personal address was scrubbed from the company system. My receptionist was instructed not to admit anyone claiming to be family without an appointment. I signed a lease for a new headquarters in a secured complex, complete with security guards and biometric entry. One Monday morning, as I sipped coffee and reviewed an exhibit layout, Marcus called. Looks like things have gone quiet, at least on paper. I just smiled, because I knew that silence wasn't acceptance, it was reluctance. But that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need them to acknowledge who I was. I just needed to stop asking for permission to be myself. My grandmother once told me, a true gem doesn't need to shout to prove its worth. It only needs to not be buried among the rocks. Now I'd been placed in the right setting, and I would never let anyone drag me back into the shadows again. I moved into my new home in early March, a modest mid-century style villa on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin, overlooking Lake Mendota. Nothing flashy, but quiet and private. It had a perimeter security fence, AI-integrated surveillance cameras, and a jewelry vault designed like a bank-grade safe room. I set up everything in my new office by hand. A warm amber desk lamp, a soft leather chair, and a vintage mahogany bookshelf I bought from a closing bookstore. The smell reminded me of childhood afternoons reading Nancy Drew in Grandma's attic. For the first time in my life, I was living in a space where I didn't have to shrink myself. Didn't have to dim my own success to make others feel comfortable. No more half sneers or half pitying glances from Mom. No more snide remarks from Lily like, that necklace looks like it's from Target. No more Sunday dinners where I had to pretend to be. normal. I was fully myself, and that was enough to fill every empty space. To my surprise, the company grew even stronger after everything. A few former clients reached out after seeing Lily's cryptic social media post. They didn't ask questions. In fact, some trusted me more because I had kept everything private for so many years. A renowned fashion designer contacted me to authenticate a personal vintage jewelry collection for an upcoming exhibition in New York. A major European museum invited me to collaborate on a project to restore a lost 18th century treasure. I hired 2 new appraisal specialists, expanded our Denver office, and signed partnership contracts with 3 international auction houses. In a strategic meeting, my CFO hesitated before saying, "We're in a position to acquire a smaller competitor in the South. If you're ready, Gabriella, this could be the time to expand our influence." I smiled. I had never chased power. What I'd sought from the very beginning was freedom. One early morning, I sat by the second-story window, a cup of black tea in hand, watching the mist roll across the lake. Grandma was outside watering the plants, still wearing her favorite sky blue cardigan. She had stayed with me longer than planned, and I hadn't stopped her. "Do you know what I'm most proud of?" she asked me one evening as we sat in my office sorting gemstones. I shook my head. She didn't say career or wealth. She just said that you stayed true to your values, even when the price was high. That line stayed with me for days. I thought about all the times I stayed silent to avoid hurting others, the nights I came home with heavy shoulders, thinking I had to be enough to be noticed. The years I pushed myself to be useful, just to be seen. Now I didn't need validation from anyone, because I had already proven to the one person who mattered most, myself, that I was enough. One day, while checking inventory for restoration, I came across the pale lavender stone swan hairpin Grandma once kept in that old box. I had held on to it for years, not for its monetary value, but because it marked the beginning of everything. I wrapped it in a blue velvet box and wrote one short note on the card. "For the girl who once felt invisible, you became the kind of light no one saw coming." I placed that box on the first shelf in my private gallery as a reminder that my journey didn't begin with privilege. It began with being forgotten. Not long after, I received an invitation to speak at an international conference on heritage and appraisal in Paris. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. I no longer feared what people might think, or worried that taking the stage might make someone in my family feel small. I was going, under my real name, with the company I'd built from the ground up, wearing the white gold ring Grandma had given me, and with the quiet pride of someone who had once been overlooked, but never forgot who she was. Gabriella's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away from your own family to find truth and freedom. Not everyone is born into the love they deserve, but everyone has the right to choose not to live forever in the shadow of injustice. Gabriella didn't just build a career from nothing. She learned how to love herself without needing approval from those who once hurt her. That's true healing. That's real freedom. What do you think about Gabriella's choice? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way for her to live true to her worth? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional family stories.